This isn't just a story about cars. It's about how a handshake, a simple business deal, turned into an all-out war. It's about a grudge so personal and so deep that it changed the world of motorsports forever. This is Ford versus Ferrari.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1966. We're at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the most prestigious, most brutal race on the entire planet. And for 6 years running, that podium has been painted Ferrari red. They were the undisputed kings. And then this happens, a sea of Ford blue. So how in the world did a company famous for building family station wagons manage to humiliate the king of racing on his own turf? Well, to get it, you've got to understand this was never about a trophy. This was about revenge.
It all kicked off with an insult, a really, really expensive insult between two absolute titans of industry. It turned what should have been a simple business deal into a full-blown personal vendetta.
So let's meet our two main characters, because they could not be more different. On one side, you've got Henry Ford II. They called him Hank the Deuce. He's running this massive industrial empire out of Detroit, cranking out cars for the everyday person. On the other side of the world, you have Enzo Ferrari, Il Commendatore, the commander. This guy was a total racing purist from Arnello, Italy. He only bothered to sell road cars to fund his one true love, winning races. Now, back in the early 60s, Ford had a bit of an image problem. Let's be honest. Their cars were seen as kinda boring. To get the younger generation excited, they knew they needed to go racing. And what's the fastest way to get a racing pedigree? Well, you buy it. So they went straight to the top, to Enzo Ferrari, with an offer of $18 million. I mean, that was an absolutely insane amount of money back then.
The deal was basically done. Lawyers had lawyered, the ink was almost dry, but just as Enzo Ferrari was about to sign on the dotted line, he spots this one little clause, a detail. It said that if he wanted to spend any serious money on his racing team, his life's work, he'd have to get it signed off by a bunch of executives in an office in Detroit. For Enzo, that was a complete non-starter. Unthinkable.
And Enzo just lost it. He absolutely exploded. He starts laying into the Ford executives, just tearing them down, attacking the very core of who they are. He told them their factories were ugly, their mass-produced cars were ugly. But then he delivered the killer blow, the one that made this whole thing personal. He told them that Henry Ford II wasn't the real Henry Ford. He was just the grandson. Ouch. And you can bet when that little comment made its way back to Detroit, Hank the Deuce had a very simple and very, very expensive message for his team. Go to Le Mans and beat his ass. And just like that, war was declared. Ford threw millions and millions of dollars at building a Ferrari killer. But here's the thing, money can buy you a lot, but what it can't buy you is decades of racing know-how. And you have to understand the size of the mountain Ford was trying to climb here. Just look at this. From 1960 all the way to 1965, Le Mans was basically the Ferrari Invitational. 6 straight wins. They were completely untouchable, the absolute kings of endurance racing.
So Ford shows up in 1964 with their brand new car, the GT40, and it was an absolute disaster, a catastrophe. Sure, the car was gorgeous and it had a ton of power, but it was also incredibly unstable and ridiculously unreliable. Not a single Ford even finished the race. And to add insult to injury, Ferrari took first, second, and third. Total public humiliation.
Okay, so 1965, Ford comes back, this time with an even bigger, badder engine. And for a little while, it looked good. They were actually faster than the Ferraris. But then the cars just started to come apart. I mean, literally, gearboxes would shatter, engines would just explode on the track. For the second year in a row, not a single Ford crossed the finish line. The company was a global laughingstock.
At this point, Henry Ford II had seen enough. The whole corporate do-it-by-the-book thing clearly wasn't cutting it. He realized you don't win Le Mans with committee meetings and spreadsheets. You win it in a greasy garage. It was time to call in some people who knew how to get their hands dirty. It was time to call in the Outlaws.
So he hands the whole mess over to Carroll Shelby, a legendary Texan, an ex-chicken farmer, and most importantly, the last guy to win Le Mans in something that wasn't a Ferrari. And Shelby brought with him his secret weapon, a guy named Ken Miles. Now Miles, he was Difficult. He was hot-tempered, didn't play well with authority, but my God, he was a genius driver and an even better engineer. He was one of those rare guys who could just feel what a car needed to be faster.
And this is where the story gets another layer. Because the real battle wasn't just happening on the track against Ferrari. It was happening inside Ford itself. You had this clash of cultures. Shelby and Miles's crew of scrappy, hands-on hot rodders versus Ford's own button-down executives, the bean counters, who just did not trust these guys.
So, what did they do? Well, they basically threw out the corporate playbook. They ripped the GT40 apart and rebuilt it from the ground up. They got the aerodynamics sorted out so the car wouldn't try to fly at 200 miles per hour. They tamed that monster 7-liter engine so it could actually last for 24 hours without blowing up. And, this is genius, they knew the brakes would be a problem, so they invented this incredible system where they could swap out the entire brake assembly, rotors and all, in just a few minutes. A total game changer.
So, fast forward to 1966. The car is finally dialed in. The team is a well-oiled machine. And you better believe Henry Ford II was more than ready to finally get his revenge on Enzo Ferrari.
And when Ford showed up to Le Mans in '66, they weren't there just to compete. They showed up with an army. Just look at that number. 8. 8 of these new, perfected GT40 Mark IIs rolled into France with one single-minded goal: to absolutely crush Ferrari.
And they did it. It wasn't even close. The Fords were just on another level. So fast and for the first time so reliable that the Ferraris literally broke just trying to keep up. When the dust settled after 24 hours, this was the podium. Ford, Ford, and Ford. A clean sweep. Mission accomplished. But, hold on, the story doesn't end there. Because in their moment of ultimate victory, the Ford executives, the bean counters, made a decision. A decision driven by PR, not by racing. They wanted the perfect picture, and it would end up costing so much more.
You see, with the race winding down, Ken Miles, the guy who had practically willed this car into existence, was leading. And not by a little bit, he was laps ahead of everyone. He had dominated the race. But then, the order came down from the Ford PR department. Slow down. Let the other two Fords catch up. We want a 1-2-3 photo finish as they cross the line together. Miles was absolutely livid, but he was a Ford employee, a team player, so he did what he was told.
Here's the gut punch. There was this obscure, little-known rule that none of the suits in the Ford pit box had bothered to look up. It says that in the event of a so-called dead heat, or a tie, the win goes to the car that started further back on the grid, because technically it traveled a slightly longer distance over the 24 hours.
And that's precisely what happened. Because Ken Miles followed orders, because he slowed down for a corporate photo op, he was robbed of his victory. The history books don't show Ken Miles as the winner. The trophy was handed to his teammate Bruce McLaren, simply because he'd started a few spots further back on the grid.
And the story doesn't get any happier. Just 2 months later, Ken Miles, the heart and soul of this whole project, the man who poured everything into making the GT40 a winner, was killed in a crash while testing the next generation of the car. He died without ever getting justice and without ever getting his Le Mans trophy.
So yeah, Ford got what they wanted. Hank the Deuce got his revenge. The billion-dollar grudge was settled. But that victory, the one born from a petty insult, it came at an unbelievable human cost. Which just leaves you wondering, right? Was that perfect photo finish really worth the price they paid?